This is another round of the Edward Jones Chatting Cage. I'm JB, getting the pitches all lined up. And you know it's a good time when the pitchers step in the cage. Brad Ziegler, the Arizona Diamondbacks, joins us. Brad, how you doing?
I'm doing well, JB. How are you?
Pretty stoked. I know the fans are excited. Twitter is a buzz or a tweeting, whatever it is that does, when there's a lot of response to a guest like yourself. Are you excited? Are you ready to take some cuts in the cage?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go for it.
All right, let's have at it. So we're going to go right to, we talked about Twitter, let's go right to it. Sir Yaz wants to know, was it hard to learn that sidearm motion?
At the end of the 2006 season, the A's approached me about, I'd always been a guy who had kind of switched arm angles just kind of for effect. They asked me about dropping down low and doing it permanently. So I spent the entire winter in 2006 working on that delivery, and honestly, all the way up until about 4 or 5 years ago, it was still kind of evolving, and then I finally kind of settled into where I wanted to be and where it's at now.
It's always fun to hear a guy in the big leagues who doesn't stop working on stuff, and things evolve. It's something that fans don't always grasp. I know where the fans are firing up their webcams to be part of the Edward Jones Chatting Cage with Brad Ziegler. We're going to get fans in here as soon as those things are ready to go, and they will join us right like that. What's your name? Where you're from? What's your question for Brad?
Hey, I'm Nick Penny from Raleigh, North Carolina. A lot of people don't know this, but you blew out the record for scoreless innings to start a career with 39. Previous record was 25. So do you think Ron Romanek teaching you to throw sidearm was the biggest turning point in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it. I think I could have got to the big leagues as an overhand pitcher. I just don't know that I would have gotten there as quick and been able to stick as long as I have. It definitely made things move a lot quicker for me. At the same time, when I got called up in 2008, I was still very much in the learning phase of this delivery. So I give a lot of my credit for what happened during that streak to the defense that played behind me, because I wasn't striking out a lot of guys, but we turned a ton of double plays that season when I was pitching, so Mark Ellis, Bobby Crosby, Eric Chavez, those guys were phenomenal in helping me get to that streak, in 2008, and hopefully, by the end of my career, that's not the only thing I'm known for. But at the same time, it's a lot of fun to be able to look back and reflect on that and realize how special it was, knowing that I've never even come close to it since then.
This is Brad Ziegler talking about that big scoreless streak to start his career, how important the infield behind him was about that. We love hearing teammates pat each other in the back, give a tip of the cap, as we know it's understood. And we love having the young fans get involved with such an in-depth question. We got a young fan ready to go now. What's your name, where you're from? What's your question for Brad?
My name's Dean Fogel. I'm from Stamford, Connecticut, and I was wondering if you prefer living in Arizona or Oakland.
I would say from a family standpoint, prefer living in Arizona just because it's a lot closer to my wife's family than Oakland was. So, from each ballpark has their own uniqueness. The fans in Oakland are rabid and crazy, and the fans in Arizona are very passionate too. The ballpark's obviously a lot different. In Oakland, it's a lot older ballpark with a lot more foul territory, very pitcher friendly. Arizona's very hitter friendly. The fans are kind of right on top of you, and each place has its own benefit, and I've always wondered, like, someday if I ever got traded back to Oakland, if it would be any different than it was before. But right now we're very happy in Arizona.
That is a great question from a young fan. Just asking about the difference between two cities. That's all. What's it like to live there? We love seeing that here in the Edward Jones Chatting Cage. Brad Ziegler's, his family's more in Arizona. That works best. Let's go to social media, and we'll head over to, let's see what it was like from Baseball 42. Did you play other sports when you were growing up?
I played basketball all the way up through high school, and my parents were very adamant about, number one, having me do multiple things, but also, number two, I could only play 2 sports a year. They wanted a certain time of the year, whenever I chose, that there was downtime. That we would have family time, and we wouldn't be traveling nonstop to games. And for me, that was the fall. Like when school first started, I didn't play football or anything in the fall season, and so that was kind of our time to kind of recharge our batteries after the long summer of baseball, and then basketball started up right around beginning of October, and headed on through February, which went right into baseball. So. But that family time for us was very important and kind of helped shape the direction I want to take my family going forward as well.
That's a really good way to look at the year on a calendar. Family, basketball, baseball. We got a fan ready to go. We'll see what this follow-up question is. What's your name? Where are you from? What's your question for Brad?
Jeremy from Miami, and I want to know, Brad, what is your favorite part about taking the mound when you go up?
I'll be honest. Even just walking out onto the field every day, it's still very surreal for me to think that I'm pitching in the big leagues. I just I look at it from the standpoint that I want to enjoy every minute of it. I know a lot of guys end up having really short careers. Some guys have really long careers, but those guys are pretty rare in this game. I'm one pitch away, one blown out shoulder, one, blown out knee from maybe my career being altered forever. While I try not to worry about the injury side of it, I also know that this game could be very short-lived, and so I just want to enjoy every single moment of it. And when I step out on the mound, usually in the 8th inning of a close game, the fans get going pretty good, and the other team is typically really focused at the plate, and I just look at it as a challenge every night to see, how am I going to get these 3 outs and get the game to our closer still with a lead intact.
This is Brad Ziegler, the Edward Jones chatting case, getting a great conversation going. Brad, I want to ask you this because I've been trying to work some things out as we get a chance to talk to a lot of the successful guys at big league level. You can't have a Hall of Fame career all at once. You can't win all the at-bats in one at-bat. So for you, both drafts you're involved in, your time with Oakland, your time with Arizona, what's been this? I always want to work on the details first. What's been the smallest thing that's had the biggest impact on your career?
Honestly, I think it sounds kind of standard, I guess, that everybody would be this way, but it's been the support of my family. Knowing I've had, we have the same, as players, have the same off-the-field troubles that everybody else has. We have fights at home. We have, people trying to kind of undercut us all the time, and we have to deal with that stuff. And it's hard to do that and still focus on the field. But when your family is 100% behind you and willing to let you vent to them and give you advice and how to move forward, and just knowing that they support me unconditionally, that allows me to go out and kind of free my mind once I step on the field, and that's important, because if you're trying to play at this level and you're distracted, you've got almost no chance of success.
Oh man, that is a great insight to understand those big differences. The success that is made by having a support like that and family around you. A good reminder to everybody to back each other up whenever you can. Another fan joins us. What's your name? Where you're from? What's your question for Brad?
Hey, I'm Jake, and I'm from Dayton, Ohio, and I was wondering what drills you do to work on your control and placing the pitches where you want to place them.
For me, the biggest drill, once I changed my delivery, the hardest thing was to make that delivery feel natural. And, I don't want to get out on the mound and be thinking about what I have to do with my legs or my arms every single pitch. I want to be able to focus on just the release of the pitch and know that everything else is going to take care of itself. So for me, repetition of my delivery is key. And when I'm, if I go through a stretch of 4 or 5 games where I haven't pitched, I've got to get on the mound and do some work to keep that delivery in check. And the way I go about that is I use, it's essentially a T-ball, like a rag ball that you would use that little kids play T-ball with. I get on the mound, put the catcher at about 55 feet, just right in front of home plate, and I just throw my fastball over and over again, maybe 15, 20 throws, going through my delivery. And by having that lighter ball, it's still got the seams on it, so I still get the feel of a real baseball in my hand. But it's by having that lighter ball, it's not quite as strenuous on my arm, and it doesn't make me sore as long as I don't overdo it, as long as I don't try to throw too hard or do too many pitches. So, you might see me out. If you see me out during batting practice throwing a bullpen before a game, I guarantee it's not with a real ball. It's going to be with one of those light balls. And so if you say, like, hey, can I have that ball? Like, I'm not going to give it to you because it's just a T-ball. So I'll try to find another ball for you at that time. But, it's like I said, repetition is the key to being able to get out on the field. As a hitter, as a pitcher, as an infielder, you don't want to be thinking about stuff. You want it to be a reaction and just natural for your body. And the only way it's going to be that way is just practicing over and over and over again.
Fantastic. 2 insights in that one. If you're a fan trying to get a ball from Brad, don't go for the T-ball. He'll be looking for a real ball. Another fan gets in the cage with us right now. What's your name? Where are you from? What's your question for Brad?
I am Grant from Cincinnati, and I know you've had a lot of injuries through your career, so I was wondering if you ever thought about walking away from baseball, and if so, what kept you in the game?
Yeah, the most serious injury I dealt with was a skull fracture at the end of the 2004 season. I was an A-ball with the A's and took a line drive off the head in the playoffs and spent 6 nights in ICU dealing with that. And it was tough because I had heard about guys that had trouble mentally getting back on the mound again. And the hardest part for me that offseason was they wouldn't let me work out. I couldn't get my blood pressure, my pulse so high that offseason because I was at risk for having seizures or even an aneurysm. And so they wanted me essentially no activity, just kind of sitting around in a chair all day playing video games. And it was really tough when that's my workout time. That's the time where I get stronger. That's the time when I get better at pitching, to essentially sit and do nothing. Whenever I got to spring training that year, I didn't know how I would react, especially the first time a ball was whistled back up the middle against me. But once it happened, it was in about my 3rd outing. Guy hit a pretty quick ground ball up the middle, and I kind of realized, like, okay, this is normal. And one thing that helped me was the doctors assured me that even if I was hit in the exact same spot by the exact same kind of line drive, it would be like a whole new injury. It wouldn't be compounded by the fact that I had one before. So that gave me a lot of peace of mind stepping out on the mound and just knowing like the odds of that happening again are not that great. So I'm just going to go out and not think about it and just try to pitch.
This is the Edward Jones chatting cage. That's Brad Ziegler giving insights on what it takes to get back on the mound after catching one, a dangerous one, to put him in the ICU. So thanks for sharing that, Brad. We're glad you are feeling good. It is good to hear that from the doctors, too, that it's not something that would be compounded by a recurrence. It's actually not that, you don't want to try it out again, I'm sure, but at least it's not,
right.
It doesn't double up on that. We'll go back to social media right now. This one is from I Am Mullen. Who's the toughest right-handed hitter you face?
Oh, gosh. I'll tell you who I faced him all the way going back to high school. And then, several times in the big leagues too. Albert Pujols was, in high school, he was so far and away better than anybody else on the field. And it was one of those situations where even every time I got him out, it seemed like he hit a rocket somewhere. It just happened to be right at somebody. And then when we got in the big leagues, the first time he stepped in the box against me, I had to intentionally walk him, which it's unusual for me to have to intentionally walk a right-handed hitter, but that just gives you the kind of idea that, how we felt about him at that time was we were not going to let this guy beat us, even when it was a favorable matchup for me being right on right. So I would put him in that category. He's one of the best of all time, and even when he struggled with injuries and stuff the last couple of years, he's come back this year and hitting, up there as good as he ever has.
He is a phenomenal athlete. I feel like when he was in high school, he probably looked like he was already a major league player.
Yeah, he was definitely a man among boys at that time. But when you visited with him, he was still kind of learning the English language at that time, and just super nice guy and real friendly. And he worked his tail off. Like you'd see him out taking extra ground balls and extra batting practice. He was a shortstop at that time. And he wanted to get better. He just loved the game of baseball so much, and it just drove him. But one thing I've always admired about him too is he's always kept his priorities in line, where his family and his kids are the most important thing to him. Right there up there with his faith, and he's not afraid to talk about it and let you know that stuff means more to him than baseball ever will.
Priorities are just absolutely important to understand in all fields. We have another fan with us. What's your name? Where you're from? What's your question for Brad?
Hi, I'm John. I'm from Georgia. I was wondering, what's the best piece of advice you've been given?
Without question, focus on the things that you have control of. There are so many things in this game that you don't have control of. And for me, essentially, once you throw the pitch, you throw the pitch and you take care of your responsibilities, whether it's covering a base or backing up a throw or whatever. But you can't control the umpire. You can't control the fielders behind you. You can't control if you're going to get traded. You can't control, whether you might get sent to the minor leagues. There are so many variables in this game that it's essentially completely out of your hands, and there's no point in stressing over that. All it does is give you anxiety that it's not going to go away, and you can't do anything to change it. So I just try to focus, keep my focus small, worry about one pitch at a time, one outing at a time, one season at a time, as opposed to trying to look in the big picture and think about all the different things that could change over the course of a year and a career.
Well, that is a great thought, and I think one we should take away with us. So, Brad, I know you got a game to deal with, one outing to deal with at a time, one game to deal with, one road trip to deal with at a time. I want to thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to be with us and the fans. Did you feel like you did okay?
My pleasure. Yeah, I hope so. I really appreciate the fans getting on, because that's your biggest fear when you're doing something like this is you wonder, like, am I going to get on here and no one's going to have any questions? So I appreciate everybody else getting on too.
That is true. It's just you and me chat with each other, not quite as exhilarating as watching those fans get in and ask those questions. Brad, thanks for being with us. That wraps another round of the Edward Jones Chatting Cage.